History in the United States as Donald Trump becomes the first former president arrested on criminal charges. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Former U.S. President Donald Trump was arraigned in federal court on charges that he allegedly mishandled highly sensitive documents and obstructed government attempts to retrieve them. The unprecedented indictment of a former president includes 31 counts under the Espionage Act. Let's go straight now to federal court in Miami and join CGTN's Nathan King. Nathan, set the scene for us. What happened in that courtroom?
Well, quite incredible scenes that we did not see. Remember, this is a federal court, so it's not like the New York case where there were pictures and video of him inside the court hallways. We rely on those wonderful people, the sketch artists, but what I can tell you is that Donald Trump was taken to the 13th floor here behind me and essentially booked. That was formally arrested and then went to the courtroom, heard the charges against him. He sat there, arms folded, glowering at the judge. Just a few meters away, of course, was Jack Smith, the special counsel who have brought these unprecedented 37 charges, 31 of which relating to some of the most secret documents that Donald Trump was totally privy to when he was president, then took, withheld, misled, according to the indictment. Of course, he's not found guilty yet, and refused to give up, and then boasted, apparently, according to evidence, about having them and showing them to other people. Quite an incredible case, a historic day, which, if he's convicted, could carry decades in prison. But as you know, Donald Trump doesn't really care for the courts and the court's opinion. He cares about the court of public opinion. So let's listen to what these charges mean and what it means for his bid to be president once more. Back in 2016, then presidential candidate Donald Trump called for his opponent, Democrat Hillary Clinton, to be sent to jail for allegedly mishandling classified information by using a private email server.
That the leadership of the FBI and the Department of Justice let Clinton off the hook for her crimes against our nation is one of the saddest moments in the history of our country.
Now the tables have turned. The case against Clinton was eventually dropped, while these charges against Trump are historic. Trump is the first former U.S. president to be charged with criminal offenses at the federal level. These charges are for holding onto secret documents and obstructing government attempts to get them back, including a charge that he violated the Espionage Act. Trump says he's innocent and has dismissed the case as a hoax. While more will become clear when the government fully reveals its indictments, the dramatic search of Trump's residence of Mar-a-Lago in Florida last August led to the discovery of multiple documents labeled classified and top secret. Trump already faces criminal charges in New York State over an alleged cover-up of hush money payments to an adult film star. But these new federal charges against Trump are much more serious and come as more and more fellow Republicans enter the presidential race, aiming to knock Trump out of the lead.
The person I am talking about, who is obsessed with the mirror, who never admits a mistake, who never admits a fault, and who always finds someone else and something else to blame for whatever goes wrong, but finds every reason to take credit for anything that goes right, is Donald Trump.
How this case against Trump will play out against the backdrop of another presidential bid remains to be seen. The timing of the trial could interfere with his campaign. The pressure of the charges and potentially other charges related to January 6th insurrection and election interference in the state of Georgia could rattle his candidacy. Nothing in U.S. law prevents Trump from running for president while facing criminal charges. Public opinion, however, will be the ultimate arbiter. So basically, what happens next? Well, the government want this case to be tried within about 70 days, Anna. Now, interestingly, we are waiting for Trump's move. Does he want this trial to go quickly, or does he want to delay it, as his political advisors may be saying, until after the presidential primary against his Republican opponents, and even after the election, which we all assume is going to be against Joe Biden in 2024 in November. But of course, he could have other cases piling up against him as well. What also to watch is that public opinion, because we are starting to see other Republican candidates, not just Chris Christie there, but Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and others suggest that these charges are so serious that Republicans should probably take a second look at him. At the moment, the polls still seem to be supporting him. There was quite a few people out here today, but I can tell you, in terms of protesters, not as many as we saw in New York, and not as many vociferously supporting Donald Trump. That's just my indication here. Let's see what the rest of America thinks.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. That's CGTN's Nathan King reporting from Miami. Well, there is, of course, much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Douglas Sloan is a senior political analyst and principal with the National Capital Strategy Group. Malik Abdul is a radio host and Republican strategist. Also with us is Reena Shah. She's a political analyst and commentator. And Gene Rossi is a former assistant U.S. attorney. He spent nearly 3 decades with the Justice Department. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Gene Rossi, let me start with you. So we just heard there, former President Trump has pleaded not guilty to the charges. Gene, we have not talked since the indictment was unsealed. What do you make of it and the merits of it, and where does it go to from here?
Well, the first thing I want to say is Donald Trump is presumed innocent. That's number one. And number two, I hope and pray he gets the full panoply of rights under the Due Process Clause. We should treat a president and a pauper the same in a court of law, especially the United States courts. But I will say this, the indictment is just mere allegations. But if some of those mere allegations are proven, my experience points towards a very strong case for the government, if the allegations are proven.
Gene, do you see, if he is found guilty on any of these charges, do you see him going to prison?
No. If he were found guilty of several of these counts, Donald Trump is not a young person. He's close to 80 years old. And when you are sentenced in a federal case, and I've had several sentencings with older people, not much older than myself, and that is a factor in sentencing. Number two, he is the president of the United States. And if he's convicted, I think at worst, he would probably get home confinement, but he is not going to go to prison if he is convicted.
Right. Gene, there are some reports that Trump's attorneys will try to get those 31 espionage charges dismissed. And for the sake of those of us, like myself, who are untutored in the law, when we talk about the Espionage Act, is that sort of the act that governs spying for a foreign country, spying on behalf of a foreign power, selling secrets to a foreign power?
Well, I want to say this. The title of the statute, the Espionage Act, and the subsection for which Donald Trump has been charged, there's a disconnect. President Trump is not charged with passing secrets to foreign agents, to foreign countries. He's not engaged in being a spy or an espionage. It's just a section of a statute that has a very inflammatory title. At essence, there are documents that are classified. He took them. There's no dispute about it.
All right.
And the issue is, did he willfully retain them in the face of a grand jury subpoena? That's the crux of this case. It's not that complicated.
Right. Malik Abdul, William Barr, who is Trump's Attorney General in that administration, he served under Trump, he spoke on a U.S. television network this past weekend. This is what he had to say. Let's listen.
If even half of it is true, then he's toast. I mean, it's a very detailed indictment, and it's very, very damning. And this idea of presenting Trump as a victim here, a victim of a witch hunt, is ridiculous. Yes, he's been a victim in the past. Yes, his adversaries have obsessively pursued him with phony claims. But this is much different. He's not a victim here. He was totally wrong that he had the right to have those documents.
So, Malik, what's your response to William Barr's comments there?
I think that what William Barr said is fair. Donald Trump obviously criticized him, but I think he's fair, and he has been critical of the Durham investigation and other what we consider witch hunts against Donald Trump. But on this point, is that for many of us who support Donald Trump, and I am still one of those, this is something that made me just totally uncomfortable. I did not like it. What I was, at least in the indictment, if there was any comfort in the indictment, I was comforted knowing that at least what we were initially told about or suspected, this idea that Donald Trump had the nuclear codes or was going to sell state secrets or something like that, what it seems as if, at least as far as the indictment as it reads, we're talking about Donald Trump bragging about things that he should not be bragging about. Yes, that is I guess could be classified as a national security risk, but it is not the gloom and doom that I initially expected. And maybe Gene would have more knowledge of this, but from what I understand about the the case that will be going to trial now, I believe it has to be a unanimous jury and a unanimous decision. And I'm not convinced that Donald Trump would not be able to get if he's convicted in this case. But it does make me uncomfortable. I don't like it at all. But at the same time, it's not as bad as I thought that it could have been based on what the reporting was at the time. But I still support Donald Trump. I just don't like this. And I'm confident enough to be able to say that.
All right, let's get a quick clarification from Gene. Gene, Malik, they're telling us that this would require unanimous verdict. So is it a tough case for the prosecution?
You know, I've had 110 federal trials, and I can say I did not win all of them. But I disagree with the Attorney General that he's toast. When you have a jury, and my colleague, fellow guest, is right, when you have a jury trial, things happen that you can never predict. And sometimes there are 1, 2, or 3 jurors that are going to, accept the argument that was Donald Trump willful and nefarious when he was bragging and talking to people about documents?
Yeah.
Or was he Donald Trump and he's just running his mouth? So that could be a defense, but it's not a strong one, I must say that.
Okay, Douglas Sloan, according to a poll that was done by ABC News, Ipsos, a plurality of Americans think that the former president should be indicted, but almost an equal number say that this is politically motivated. And when you look at Republican voters, it's even clearer. 76% say it is political. I mean, are you concerned that the political framing of this by Trump supporters is that this is a political hit job worthy of the worst tin pot dictatorships around the world?
Absolutely not. Putting my political hat on, which is always on as I'm a political analyst and a creature of politics, to say that this is a political hit job from Joe Biden and the Democrats is absolutely ludicrous. Listen, Trump is the guy that the Dems want to run against. That virtually assures Joe Biden to get reelected. That is the weakest candidate that they have in the general election. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in 2020 before January 6th, before the indictment in Manhattan for paying hush money to Stormy Daniels, before this happened with the taking the documents to Mar-a-Lago and before the potential seditious conspiracy. So, and before what happened with Gene Carroll, with the conviction in New York, right? It is a civil charge on sexual assault. So all of these things have happened since the last election. None of that is going to help Donald Trump gain moderate Democrats or independent voters. So to say that this is a political hit job is just silly. Joe Biden wants to run against Donald Trump. Yeah. That is his strongest chance for re-election. So it makes no sense whatsoever.
Right, you say it may be silly, but I just cited that poll to you, that ABC News Ipsos poll, where a plurality of Americans, an equal number, as I said, say it is politically motivated.
Well, a plurality of Americans are wrong. It doesn't make any sense. I can tell you from a Democratic strategist viewpoint,
Yeah.
Trump is the guy that Biden wants to face November. Biden's numbers and confidence goes down with each candidate that he faces, from Ron DeSantis, maybe on down to Chris Christie. I'll be very candid with you. As a Democratic strategist, the Dems do not want to see Chris Christie in November facing off against Joe Biden. So, I mean, the plurality is wrong here. The American public is wrong. The Dems would like to see Donald Trump in November. That virtually assures Joe Biden another 4 years.
All right, okay. Rena, great to have you with us in the studio. Former President Donald Trump's lawyer, attorney, and spokesperson, Alina Habba, she said this shortly after his appearance in court. Let's listen to her.
From the Russia hoax, to the attorney generals, to the corrupt DAs in Georgia and New York, and now this. The people in charge of this country do not love America. They hate Donald Trump.
What do you make of that?
You know, this is the verbiage that's going to come out of MAGA world, regardless of what Donald Trump is facing on any particular day. They want to make it about what he came out in 2016 telling us, is that there's this deep state, that there's this establishment that's against a guy like him, an outsider. Even though he's won the presidency once, you'll hear that line with him, and it reoccurs. You know, I must say, we're sitting here at a unique moment in time. He stood for election twice, but he only won one time, yet he's been indicted twice. I'm really concerned about what this says about America to the rest of the world. Does it say we're a nation of laws? Or does it say that we allow for politically motivated stunts? And that is what the Republicans are saying about Democrats today.
Yeah.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who sits in the House, a congresswoman from South Carolina who's thought to be quite moderate, she came out punching today. And she said the sitting president is having his political opponent arrested. Think about that. Those were her words on Twitter. So you've got even moderates punching back against Democrats, saying this is politically motivated. But I think this says we're a nation of laws. So
but when you hear stuff like that, do you think it'll resonate with voters? I mean, people also point to the fact, and we've heard this often over the past few days and weeks, that there's two standards of law, it appears here, that it doesn't apply to everyone equally.
You know, there's going to be a lot more talk of that as we see more come out into the public light. Of course, we've heard from Bill Barr and even Nikki Haley today, who is in the primary against Trump, saying that this indictment is damning. But what does that mean to the average person who still supports Trump? And I think that just says, you know, look, there's a lot out there that people could be charged with. And people, meaning former presidents, current presidents, there's a lot of Republicans who say that the Biden family is guilty of many crimes. So I think when we look at how this could resonate and what impact this has on the 2024 general election, I don't see it having much of one. But what I do see is this culture of political fundraising off of moments like this. And I think that's quite odd. But secondly, I want to draw attention to the fact that we've not seen political violence after the first arraignment of Donald Trump in Manhattan and now in Miami. He's being arraigned today and was charged, of course. Have we seen people come out the way January 6th rioters did? We haven't. And I think that's a very good thing, because to me, that speaks volumes. That says there are consequences for your actions. And what the general public, American public, saw is don't do what somebody inciting you to be violent says you should do, because there are consequences. So many hundreds of people have been charged and are sitting in prison today for rioting, for the the insurrection at the Capitol that Trump directly caused. And so I'm very glad that we are not seeing that political violence after that first arraignment, nor today.
Jean, getting back to the case, the judge who is initially overseeing the trial is Eileen Cannon. There is a feeling that she had previously made decisions favorable to former President Trump. Of course, as we just heard, this will be a jury trial, but what impact could the judge have in a case like this?
Well, regardless whether it's Aileen Cannon or any judge, a judge has a lot of power over the tone, the pace, and the tenor of a trial. I can tell you this from my experience. And what she can do is she can handle and put her thumb on the scale when it comes to keeping out evidence or letting evidence in on pretrial motions, on jury selection. Forget sentencing, of course, they have a lot of discretion there, but they have a lot of discretion on the mode and operation of a trial, and that is a powerful tool.
I want to get a little bit into some of the details of this case here, Gene. Could this judge, Judge Cannon, could she exclude discussions that took place between Trump and his attorney? Now, a former court ruled that that evidence is admissible, but could she throw it out?
You have asked a absolutely great question. If I were the defense attorney for Donald Trump, I'd think of one motion right now. That would be to revisit the decision by the judge in D.C., the grand jury judge, if you will, who said that the attorney-client privilege was pierced by what they call the crime fraud exception. In other words, Evan Corcoran and his notes should not have been allowed to be used by the prosecution in presenting that indictment. If this judge reverses the ruling of the D.C. judge and says that the attorney-client privilege should have remained, then that indictment, ab initio, is fatally flawed because defective information, false information, or poisonous information was given to the jury and it was returned against Donald Trump. That would be a basis for dismissing the indictment. And if that doesn't work, then keeping it out at trial. That's a very, very good question, and I would focus on that issue like a laser beam.
Right, and just to be clear, Gene, the fact that this judge ruled that this information could be handed to the prosecution, it doesn't set any kind of precedent, does it? I mean, can other cases and other lawyers say, or other prosecutions say, hey, look, we want to look at that information too?
No, every case is fact-specific, and this one is fact-specific. I will say this. If Judge Cannon or whatever judge is on this trial allows Evan Corcoran to testify and allows his notes to help corroborate his testimony, that's pretty damning evidence of obstruction.
Malik Abdul, back in 2016, candidate Donald Trump at that time had this to say about classified information. Let's listen.
In my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law.
So Donald Trump also said, Malik, that we cannot have someone in the White House who does not understand the meaning of confidential or classified. Has he broken his own rules here?
Well, of course, it's politics. Are you asking me, are there hypocrites in politics? Of course there are. Even in 2016, if we're going back to that time, look at the conversation that was happening in 2016 around Hillary Clinton and her emails. That was another conversation, and we know that there are things, at least as far as James Comey is concerned, the FBI director that Donald Trump ended up firing himself, James Comey decided not to pursue the investigation into Hillary Clinton, who did something different from other federal government officials, where she didn't just have a private domain. She had all of her information stored on a private server when she was Secretary of State. Democrats have a very different position on having that type of classified information on a private, unauthorized server than they do now. So yes, there are hypocrites in politics. It happens all the time. The political pendulum swings both ways, but I have no problem pointing out that in this instance, absolutely Donald Trump is being a hypocrite, because all politics in most ways really are. But I just wanted to also say that at this point, even going back to the summer of 2021, there has been no evidence that Donald Trump has conspired or had any involvement or incitement in what happened on January 6th, which was a terrible thing. But Donald Trump did not incite violence, and Donald Trump did not direct any of the violence, at least according to our federal government at this point.
When we look at a case like this, which is sucking up all the oxygen, I mean, this country is politically polarized, and we've seen that for quite some time. I mean, is a case like this going to really harden those divisions and lead to sort of tit-for-tat prosecutions? Are we going to see a former Democrat president now being prosecuted when the Republicans are holding the reins of power?
I certainly hope not, because as a nation of laws, there should be some connection to what's on the books. And look,
but it's also political, isn't it?
You know, there's some sense of that, but I think justice took time here, and there are many people that wanted the indictments far sooner. They felt that at the time, if we've got such damning evidence, that how come the Justice Department and of course law enforcement locally couldn't do what they were doing at a faster rate. And I say the raid at Mar-a-Lago is a perfect example of that. Donald Trump and his team were told to comply multiple times by the National Archives. They just chose not to. And so there are going to be parallels drawn between this and Joe Biden's files, in which confidential docs were found, and not just confidential, classified, okay? But his team, and they notified law enforcement as well. So there does become that tit for tat of you have to dig into the details and see what was done here. And then of course, former VP Pence also faced the same thing of having classified documents in his possession. And he was seen to cooperate and then of course cleared. I just think we're in a moment in time where we have to be very careful about how we talk about truly what our former elected officials can do. Presidents go on to be private citizens. When they commit wrongdoing in office, there is a shield, it seems, shielding them from certain prosecution. But when they go into private life and there is evidence, I think it's incumbent upon those in power to take their time. And I see that's what's been done here. But there will be Republicans who want revenge, and they will get their revenge at the ballot box, is what I have to say.
Right. Douglas, we've just got a little bit of time left, but what do you make of these allegations, accusations, you want to call them, that there is hypocrisy afoot here, that Hillary Clinton was not charged, that, well, of course, the Joe Biden case, that is still being investigated. In fact, he's also being investigated in another case involving his links to his son's business. I mean, how do you respond to those accusations?
Well, Comey made the decision not to go forward. And in this case, AG Merrick Garland and Jack Smith did make the decision. They did decide that there was enough evidence. They did decide that there was enough of egregious movements by Donald Trump to try to obstruct and not return those top secret documents, that it made sense to move forward. So I mean, I don't see the hypocrisy. I see the hypocrisy of what Malik was saying earlier regarding, yes, Donald Trump is being a hypocrite, but I don't really see any hypocrisy there, because believe me, if there was a there with Hillary Clinton, they would have moved on.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.